ordinary people and mingle with the public and to act like spies.
On the one hand, the ordinary people and the aristocrats were all dressed up in their finest. On the other, right next door, the Chinese were making elaborate military preparations, with soldiers carrying rifles as if they might attack at any moment. It was unbelievable that these two extraordinary situations could be happening at the same time. The position between the Chinese and the Tibetans was becoming irreconcilable. It was an incredible situation that was unfolding. If you had told an outsider, they wouldn't believe you. But that's how it was.
One aspect, the whole atmosphere is so tense. Many people actually felt whether this big gathering can take place or not, because it is so much tense. But then everything go very smoothly. So everybody very happy. My final examination, successful. I think very successful. And also, I myself, from the corner of my mind, another thing is, now no more any lesson.
The Dalai Lama returned to the Norbalinka with his full retinue, but this time he was accompanied by armed guards. Little did he know that this 1,000-year-old ceremonial procession through Lhasa would be his last. The Chinese Governor-General of Tibet invited Dalai Lama to see a dance troupe at the Chinese military headquarters. In the name of dispensing with formality, the Chinese requested that he attend with unarmed bodyguards. Worried that a refusal would worsen the fragile situation, the Dalai Lama accepted, but the news soon spread.
The Tibetan people came pouring into the Norbalinka, and their spokesmen forced their way into our official meetings. So His Holiness didn't go. This meant that any communication between the Chinese and the Tibetans had completely broken down. As this had happened, everybody felt it wasn't safe for His Holiness to stay. You could never tell what the Chinese might do. So everyone wanted him to leave as soon as possible. Although that was what everyone was thinking and what everybody wanted, no one dared say it out loud. We were all terrified.
The Dalai Lama received news that the Chinese were planning to attack the crowd surrounding the Norbalinka and bomb the building. Convinced that if he left, the people would be saved, he decided he had to leave.
Of course, I think topmost in my mind is fear, sadness, and almost like the feeling of desperate. And also leaving some of my close friends, sweepers, or some monks who look after temples or the libraries in Norbalinka, and including my dog. So as a human level, very sad, one factor. Then also, several thousand Tibetan, suppose different Norbalinka already gets there. So that also additional worry. If something happens, then thousands of people will die. Then also, my own life, there is danger. One person's sort of future, but the future of Tibet also is related. So therefore, anxiety, fear, little doubt, hesitation, and sadness, all mixed, very much mixed.
That night, the Dalai Lama escaped from the Norbalinka, disguised as a Tibetan soldier.
I had an indescribable feeling. On the one hand, I was exultant that His Holiness was able to leave. On the other hand, I was very sad when I saw him. Unlike the usual protocol and fanfare, he left wearing an ordinary brown uniform, carrying a rifle like a soldier.
Then next day, reach southern Tibet. Then fear of my life, then no longer. Then we have no hesitation to criticize about our Chinese brothers and sisters. While in Lhasa, although sometimes we criticize, but from one corner of our mind, be careful, be careful, be careful, or that kind of sort of situation. Then as soon as we reach southern Tibet, the free from Chinese forces, we get some extraordinary feeling. Now, freedom.
2 weeks later, after an arduous journey through the Himalayas, the Dalai Lama reached safety in northern India.
That morning, around dawn, he began shelling the noble Inca. At around 9 or 10, I went to Chokpuri Hill, to the defensive position I had been assigned to monitor. When I looked towards the Potala, I saw there was a huge fire in the eastern wing. Near the account section, a huge fire.
The canal bombardment started from the bottom of the hills upwards. That was followed by the rat-a-tat-tat of the machine gun fire. It was relentless. In any case, eventually, even the Tulakan was taken over and completely looted. Everything except for the George statue and the Sungze chapel, it was left like an empty shell. Everything else was destroyed. It was taken over by the Chinese soldiers and turned into, what's the word in Chinese? A trote. We weren't allowed in because it was turned into a military barracks and heavily guarded.
Then around 4 or 5 in the evening, when I looked across at the Ramakang ferry crossing, I saw large numbers of Tibetan horsemen, foot soldiers and ordinary people. Many of them were from the Tibetan volunteer force. Then the relentless bombardment began. In the dust and smoke, I saw people and horses falling. The intense bombardment went on for about an hour or two. That day, over 1,000 of our people were killed. I saw it all with my very own eyes.
The Tibetan resistance, made up of freedom fighters and monks who had taken up arms for the first time in their lives, were no match for the Chinese army. They surrendered after 3 days. The Tibetan government was abolished, and the Chinese systematically began to destroy Tibetan society and its Buddhist culture and traditions. Monasteries were looted and scriptures burnt. Nuns and monks were forced to denounce their faith. They were also made to discard their robes and grow their hair. They were even forced to marry each other. Class resentment amongst the peasants over Tibet's feudal system was ruthlessly exploited. The government officials and aristocrats had their long hair shaved off, were imprisoned or forced to do menial jobs. They were subjected to public interrogation sessions, many resulting in death. The Indian government granted the Dalai Lama political asylum, and 80,000 refugees escaped from Tibet to join him. He has lived here in Dharamsala, known as Little Lhasa, ever since. The Dalai Lama appealed to the United Nations, calling on China to respect the human rights of Tibetans and their desire for self-determination. Despite 3 resolutions adopted by the UN General Assembly, the fact that thousands of monasteries were destroyed and hundreds of thousands of Tibetans were imprisoned in labour camps the international community refused to intervene. It's tragic that Tibetans have lost their homeland, and with no tangible international intervention. But coming here, looking around, one can see that despite everything, Tibetans retain their sense of national identity, their culture, and their pride.
Looking at these pictures that you have here in front of me, it's entirely a different world. And it was, to me, it's very sad. For instance, like my grandfather wanted Tibet. I get very emotional to talk about Tibet, you know. My grandfather wanted Tibet to be with the outside world and to join the United Nations, to educate the Tibetans outside and to be with the modern world. But his visions and his wishes, and also his 13th Dalai Lama and the 14th Dalai Lama had a wish that we must have contact with the international world. But unfortunately, from our own side, we were so blind and we knew nothing of the outside world. We were just so engrossed in our little pond, you know, so we knew nothing, what was happening to the world, what could happen, and so we lost our country.
The Dalai Lama advocates a middle way, which means he wants Tibetans to move back to Tibet, even if they become a minority within China, but a minority with a degree of self-rule. He remains determined that the dialogue between the Chinese and the Tibetans remains peaceful and positive.
Middle approach is the best. So present Chinese government policy regarding different minorities, particularly regarding Tibet, is not healthy or not good for long run. So kind of new opinions as a result of better awareness now coming. So therefore, basically, I'm hopeful. Thank you.
Phuntsog Tsering escaped to India in 1959. He is now the Dalai Lama's personal tailor. Shuo Lobsang Darji spent 15 years in a Chinese prison in Lhasa. He escaped to India in 1985 and became the Chief Justice Commissioner for the Tibetan government in exile. Usha Nawang Tashi escaped to India in 1959. He retired as a chum teacher in 1990. The Venerable Jampa Sultram served 20 years in a Chinese prison in Lhasa. He escaped in 1980 and worked at Dalai Lama's private office. The Venerable Tenzin Chonyi Tara escaped from Tibet in 1959 and worked for the Dalai Lama's private office until he retired in 2003. Jampa Chodin was forced to give up being a nun and marry a monk. She escaped to India in 1984. Professor Samdong Rinpoche escaped to India in 1959. He is now the Prime Minister of the Tibetan government in exile. Namgyal Takla left Tibet in 1956. She's lived in Switzerland, America, and now India, working for the Tibetan government in exile.